The big 4-0. We're 40, y'all. 2 score. In days, not years, though. Who can tell the difference anymore? We've reached 40 days of weirdness, isolation, and economic hardship. But on the plus side, it's Friday. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. I just want to prep you. We learned a whole lot more about what Oregon and Washington are going to try and do to open us back up for business. Spoiler alert, it's not happening anytime too soon, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel. For now, reach out to me, say hello, find us on Facebook or Instagram, email thestory@kgw.com, or use Twitter and the hashtag HeyDan. We read some of them at the end of the show, and honestly, I don't have a ton to do this weekend, so let's talk. Hey, you know how every year Merriam-Webster comes out with the word of the year? It's always something really topical. Like last year, it was the gender-neutral pronoun they. In 2018, it was justice. In 2017, feminism. You get it right. All this to say that there's probably no doubt in my mind that the word for 2020 will have something to do with all of this craziness we're dealing with, this COVID-19. Because in the last month and a half, we've all learned a lot of new terms like flattening the curve and social distancing and antibody testing. And sometimes I think we here in the news business make this mistake of assuming that everybody knows everything that we mean. They know all of this little terminology. Now don't get me wrong, I'm sure many of you do, but I have this feeling that there's somebody out there who might need a little bit of help. And that brings us to a segment that I like to call I'm Afraid to Ask Now, where we try to explain those things that have been in the news for a little while, but maybe you don't completely understand. And we're going to start off with the easy one here, flattening the curve. And I feel like most of us know this one at this point. You think of COVID-19 cases as a graph going up and up. We kind of skip past it there pretty quickly on your TV screens there, but we all try to get that thing to level out by not going out and socially distancing. Then pandemic versus epidemic. Epidemic is basically a localized outbreak, a spike of cases in one area, while a pandemic is an epidemic spread over a large area, like several countries or continents. And antibody test. This is one that's been out there a lot recently. The CDC explains it on its website. This is a specific kind of blood test that can show if you have had previous infection with the virus. Basically, if you've already been sick with COVID-19, whether you knew it or not. All right, those are the basics. Now let's step it up to level 2. Some of the newer terms that we started hearing in the last week or so that are really going to play heavily into this next phase of the pandemic. And the first one is contact tracing.
For COVID-19 testing and contact tracing.
Is Oregon planning to implement contact tracing?
For the purposes of contact tracing.
All right, contact tracing. It is the process of identifying, assessing, and managing people who have been exposed to a contagious disease to prevent onward transmission. And that's been a big talker in Oregon and really around the entire world in the last couple of days because they think it's going to be the key to fighting this virus moving forward. The state is taking it very seriously. Just 2 days ago, our friends at the Oregonian got their hands on a draft proposal for businesses to keep track of customers' names, contact information, and the date of their visit so that the state could monitor potential spread. Now, that was just a proposal, though today we got a taste of what the state's actual plan is, which is the topic of tonight's big story. So the governor talked this morning about the steps that we're all going to have to take to even think about starting to reopen. Now, today we took our first little baby steps. Non-emergency surgeries got to go ahead and start back up. But honestly, that was pretty much it. As I said before, it's been 40 days since the governor's stay-at-home executive order went into place, and so much has changed in that time. The governor remarked on that today.
I know it was just a month ago, but holy smokes, it feels a lot longer than that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Holy smokes.
Holy folk smokes? Am I saying that correctly? Haven't heard that one before. How do you even say holy folk smokes in sign language?
Holy smokes.
Okay, never mind contact tracing, never mind flattening the curve. I think we have our new word for 2020. It's folk smokes. Congratulations to Governor Brown. You've made the list. We are very professional journalists here who take our jobs very seriously. So in all seriousness, Governor Brown said Oregon needs to do 3 things if we want to reopen. Make testing available to anybody showing symptoms. Make testing available to people in vulnerable living settings, places like nursing homes. And create ongoing widespread randomized testing to track the virus and monitor the most at-risk communities like tribal communities or communities of color. The governor also announced this partnership with OHSU called Be the Key. Key. Remember, no government plan is complete without an alliterative and inspiring name. So Be the Key is a statewide study. Health leaders will invite 100,000 Oregonians to volunteer starting on May 11th. And those Oregonians will have their temperatures and systems tracked for a year. And 10,000 of them will receive at-home coronavirus tests. That brings us now to our quote of the day from Governor Brown. She said simply, this program is a game changer. But keep in mind, the change to the game will go on for 12 months. In other words,
I want to be clear that we will not be able to open Oregon quickly or in one fell swoop. This process will happen much more slowly than any of us would like. However, in certain parts of the state, we see almost 0 cases and few hospitalizations. It is my hope that some counties or regions could have the ability to begin the process of reopening as soon as May 15th.
And as we've reported here on the story, that the governor will likely start to let rural communities relax their social distancing before other places like highly populated Portland, for instance, because again, if we reopen too soon, things could go poorly. And Governor Brown could probably end up saying this.
But holy smokes.
All right, as I mentioned at the top, that Oregon did in fact start relaxing its restrictions today, but not much. Kyla Boshi takes it from here.
Doctors and dentists got the green light to reopen in Oregon. They can start seeing patients again for non-urgent procedures, including everything from elbow surgery to teeth cleaning. At Legacy Health, priority will go to the most urgent cases, and they'll only treat about half the number of patients they'd normally see, explained Chief Medical Officer Louis Lowe.
It gives us the chance to make sure all the things we're going to do to keep people safe are working. And, we're very confident in them. We know they're going to work, but we don't want to overwhelm the system initially. We want to build some confidence both from our staff and for the public that's going to be using it.
For patients, the experience may look and feel a little different. At Stacy Geisler's oral surgery clinic in Lake Oswego, patients will be pre-screened, then asked to wash hands and put on a mask while waiting.
We took out all of our waiting room chairs, and we have only 3 chairs in our waiting room, and they're all, distanced about 10 feet apart.
They'll be cared for by staff in protective equipment.
We're bringing back one patient at a time, and we're adding about 50% more time to care for that patient so that we can don and doff our PPE, all the hygiene that's involved with cleaning all the surfaces, the floors, all of that. It just takes more time.
Okay, Kyla Boshi joining us now. So not all of the clinics are going to be opening up right away. Why are some opening up sooner than others?
Well, one of the big issues is they have to have PPEs, or the protective equipment, right? The masks, the gloves, the gowns, and that's a requirement by the state before they reopen to begin these procedures. So the big hospitals, the surgery centers, they've got to have 30 days worth of protective equipment. The smaller clinics like the dentist's office, they've got to have 14 days worth. What's interesting here is you remember back at the beginning of this pandemic, the government said, listen, give us all your PPEs. We need everything you've got. Well, now they're ready to open up, and the government's telling them, listen, you've got to have all these PPEs on hand. We talked to some dentists that said, listen, we're kind of in an opposition here. We're trying to get supplies so we can reopen. Luckily, in many cases, the county health department is helping them out by providing those much needed PPEs.
The point is, though, it's not as easy as flipping a light switch, right? And everything's back to normal. And I think the people at home know that as well. So are they expecting patients to just start showing up again, or what?
Good question. I talked to a number of dentists today, and they had an interesting perspective. They said, listen, we're happy to have people come back, but the reality is not everybody is going to come back. We understand that. We're patient. And in reality, we can't accommodate everybody all at once anyway, because our procedures are much slower. So it's maybe a good thing that not everybody's coming back at once.
Interesting point. Kyla Boshi, thank you. Governor Inslee made perhaps, the most predictable announcement today. He said Washington's stay-at-home order isn't going anywhere until at least May 31st.
I've got to just at the outset recognize something that all of we Washingtonians have to realize, and that we have not won this fight against this virus.
Right after he said that, the governor kind of laid out Washington's version of their reopening plan. And there are 4 phases. Phase 1, lifting some restrictions by mid-May, like curbside retail pickup and drive-in church services. Phase 2 would be allowing more outdoor recreation, stuff like camping. Restaurants at half capacity and barbershops could reopen. Then there's Phase 3. Gatherings of 50 would be allowed, and restaurants could book 75% capacity. Finally, Phase 4. Bars and restaurants would go back to normal capacity, but social distancing would still be expected. Now, look, the plan is a lot more nuanced than all of that. So if you're really curious on all the details, I recommend you go to kgw.com. You can read it top to bottom there. Governor Inslee also didn't assign any dates to these phases, but he did say it would be at least 3 weeks in between each phase. They would also have to factor in the usual things like the contact tracing, testing capacity, and how ready the healthcare system is before moving on to the next phase. Now, here in the Northwest, the first day of May usually means that people like me in the news business are on protest watch for the most of the day. Today, though, a little bit different. People still gathered for May Day protests, just from their cars. They drove around businesses where essential workers are still on the job, demanding safe working conditions during this pandemic, and they managed to make a whole lot of noise. But things were a lot more peaceful than we've seen in the past.
When you think of May Day, you probably think of stuff like this.
Comply with this direction.
But that is not how it started. So how did we get here? Let's go back. Let's go way, way back to ancient times. Many different cultures, like the Egyptians, the Greeks, and Romans, celebrated the warmer weather of spring and summer when their crops would start to grow. Julius Caesar declared the Festival of Flora a Roman holiday to honor the Roman goddess of flowers. This later evolved into Celtic and Germanic celebrations, and eventually people started dancing around a maypole, which they still do today in Europe. So when did May Day go from frolicking in the flowers to rioting in the streets? On May 1st, 1886, thousands of workers across the U.S. went on strike, rallying for an 8-hour workday. The protest went on for days and ended violently with what's known as the Haymarket Affair. Police had ordered protesters at Haymarket Square in Chicago to leave when someone threw a bomb at officers. 7 policemen and 4 workers were killed, and dozens of others were hurt. That sparked a lot of anti-union crackdowns. So in 1889, socialist labor groups decided to designate May 1st as International Workers' Day. Since then, the protests have continued, sometimes violently, over workers' rights. And that's how we got here.
And as you know, some of the protests around here have gotten pretty bad. We dug into the KGW vault for some of the highlights, or I guess lowlights would be more applicable to this. This was the scene on May Day 2017 in Portland. Police moving in to break up a rally when they decided got too violent. People started setting fires, breaking windows, and damaging buildings. Dozens of people got arrested. And this is what happened in Seattle in 2013. It started as a peaceful march, but then turned violent. Protesters, threw rocks and bottles at police and news crews, and they caused a lot of damage to businesses. Police blamed anarchists for the violence. That was actually the second year in a row that things got out of hand in Seattle. But May Day protests in both cities have been pretty peaceful in recent years.
Historically, there is one surefire way to get a good shot at being governor of Oregon: become Secretary of State first. And this year's race is a crowded one. Meanwhile, one single campaign mailer is causing all kinds of headaches for Mayor Wheeler. And one story of fighting COVID-19 from the front lines.
People need to take this very seriously.
And the home front.
I've had people bring us meals. I've had people drop off gifts.
When the story continues.
It's been kind of a rough week, I would say, for Mayor Ted Wheeler. First, he got sued over campaign donations. More on that in just a second. And now he's dealing with a flyer that went out to voters that's got some stuff on it that's not true. If you live in the Portland area, you might have gotten one of these in the mail. It lists a bunch of people and groups that have endorsed Mayor Wheeler, or that's what it seems like. See that Timbers and Thorns logo? See the two of them right there? Well, this got posted to Twitter, and the team's owner went, huh? What? Merritt Paulson says he personally donated to Wheeler, but that the teams did not endorse him. Also, apparently Wheeler's camp didn't even put the right Timbers logo on the mailer. But look, this wasn't actually Wheeler's fault. All right, what happened was the COO of the Timbers also endorsed Wheeler, and he thought that he was signing off on his name and title to be used as an endorsement, but mistakenly signed off for the entire team. So they've cleared that all up now, and we should bring up the other mistake that's on the flyer. Commissioner Chloe Eudaly's name was listed under the endorsement too, but just a few days ago she posted on Facebook this whole long thing there, just she's not endorsing anybody. We checked with her today and nothing has changed. Wheeler says that he knew Eudaly hadn't endorsed him, and this was a misunderstanding within his campaign. He says, ultimately, it is my responsibility and no one else's to ensure that what goes out to the public is 100% accurate. I regret that I did not catch the air before the mailer was sent. I have personally apologized to Commissioner Eudaly on behalf of my campaign and assured her that this is a one-time mistake that will not happen again. By the way, we looked into all of the other endorsements that Wheeler listed, and those are all accurate. So back to that lawsuit against Wheeler. Another mayoral candidate, Sarah Iannarone, wanted to stop him from spending any of the large donations that he received. Last week, you may remember the Oregon Supreme Court ruled on campaign donation limits in Multnomah County that voters passed in 2018. So for the first time in 25 years, the courts decided these limits were allowed. Up until now, you've been able to give as much money as you want to a candidate in Oregon. Well, the Portland City Auditor has decided to start enforcing these $500 limits in the city elections next week. Wheeler says that he won't take any more donations larger than $500, but a judge just decided that he can still spend those big donations that he got before the Supreme Court ruling. And on that note, the Secretary of State just announced that unlimited campaign donations are still allowed in all statewide elections. She talked to the Department of Justice, and they determined that since the Supreme Court case had to do with donation limits in Multnomah County, it doesn't apply anywhere else. Now, one of the races, those statewide races that we're really paying a close eye to, paying close attention to, is the race for Oregon's Secretary of State. Right now, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans are running. And our election is on May 19th. It will narrow that one down to one from each party. Recent Oregon history shows us how crucial this role is in our government. Pat Doors introduces us to the candidates.
Let's start with the Democrats. Each is a veteran lawmaker with loads of experience. Shemia Fagan and Mark Hass talked to our Laura Porter during the taping of Straight Talk. Fagan is a civil rights attorney who grew up in Eastern Oregon. She served on the David Douglas School Board, served in the state house, and is now a state senator. She lives in the greater Portland area. She said one of her priorities would be audits.
And so this is a challenge unlike anything we faced here in Oregon and nationally and really the world. And I think that we have a lot to learn. And as Secretary of State, I could do an emergency preparedness audit and look at everything across the board, from the unemployment system, also to the way that we were able to do our democracy and our voting.
Let me jump in here.
Mark Hass started his professional life as a TV news reporter covering the state legislature. In 2001, he began serving in the State House and is now a state senator, living also in the greater Portland area. He's the author and sponsor of the Student Success Act, the largest funding bill for schools in Oregon history.
I think I'm the only one that's talking about establishing an Office of Cybersecurity in the Secretary of State's office. We need to upgrade the technology big time. Everyone knows we're under attack, our election system, and this recent virus situation with people not being able to process their employment claims, their unemployment benefits through the old rickety computers we have in the employment division, I think is a red flag for everybody.
Jamie McLeod Skinner is a natural resources attorney. She lives in Central Oregon. Her government experience includes serving as a city councilor in Santa Clara, California, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and Jefferson County Education Service District Board.
My priorities are election security and integrity. That's everything from protecting from hackers and increasing overall turnout, decreasing the discrepancies between different demographics, and ensuring fair redistricting. Also ensuring that government is accountable through financial and performance and equity and sustainability audits. managing our natural resources and our public resources for environmental and economic sustainability.
On the Republican side, Kim Thatcher owns a construction project management company and lives in Kaiser. She became a state representative in 2005 and is now a state senator.
What I think needs to happen, especially in recovering from this pandemic, auditing programs and agencies and our response to this pandemic to learn lessons and maybe do things better, prepare better. Also, we're going to be hit with a huge budget deficit because of the shutdown, no economic activity, businesses are down, which means the income tax receipts are way down.
Her Republican opponent is Dave Stauffer, an environmental engineer who lives in the Portland area and did not submit any information to the voter's guide.
Thanks to Pat Dorris. And by the way, he mentioned there that Senators Fagan and Hass are going to be on Straight Talk with Laura Porter this week. They're considered two of the leading Democrats on the ticket, so you can hear a lot more from them tonight at 7 o'clock in lieu of our usual COVID-19 Q&A. You may remember at the beginning of the month, on April 7th, we introduced you to Dr. Luke Northern. He's the nephew of a viewer in Tigard, actually, and he flew out to New York City just as the COVID cases started to grow out of control there. He left his wife and 3 kids in Chicago. He spent the entire month intubating sick people with breathing tubes at an ICU in Brooklyn. I talked to him after just his second shift at the beginning of the month, and he told me just after like 2 nights in that it was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was even worse than he expected, and he sent me photos of trucks outside being used to store the dead. Well, Dr. Luke got back home last night rather, and we talked just a few hours ago. We talked about the emotional aspects of everything that he saw there, of course, but I was very curious about the medical strides that they made in fighting this virus, considering how many cases they saw.
As far as care is concerned, there's been a lot of discussion about what is working, what isn't working. What were you guys using? Was there anything there that you saw as a glimmer of hope or something that seemed to be combating this differently than what you noticed when you first arrived?
Unfortunately, no. And there's no magic antiviral, no magic medicine, no steroids, nothing that we really did that could make this disease better.
Someone like you who is facing this head-on in hospitals in one of the hardest hit areas of the country, what's your impression of the way the country itself is moving forward with its interpretation of the severity of things?
I think the vast majority of the country is doing the right thing. You do see, people out in the protest and saying it's fake or COVID is not real. I think people can kind of roll their eyes at those kinds of people. We know that it's real. I think that when it comes to reopening the country, I'm certainly not an expert in this, so this is my opinion versus like an expert analysis. But we have to be very careful. People need to take this very seriously. It is clear that social distancing has worked. We saw what it did in New York. Without social distancing, what happened in New York would have happened everywhere in the country.
It was great to talk to Dr. Luke. It was nice of him to spend so much time with us and our viewers and share what he saw and what he experienced. And we shall be very proud of people like him. I don't think I'm alone in saying that. We have a lot of people just like that living right here in our area in Oregon and Washington. But I want to remind everyone of something. Let's take another look at some of the family photos that they sent in. He's not the only person in those pictures. That's his wife, Amy. Liam is 7, April is 6, and 4-year-old Ray had a birthday while Dad was gone. Amy raised those 3 kids alone for a month during all of this craziness, helped them finish the school year, and I think every parent out there knows how fun that has been. When you think of the people on the front lines, don't forget about the people holding down the fort.
I really don't think I would have made it through these almost 4 weeks without the support from friends and family. I've had people bring us meals. I've had people drop off gifts and things for the kids to entertain them, and it just it's been a huge help, and it really has helped us get through.
Amy needed that support. If you have a doctor or a nurse living in your neighborhood, I'm betting their husband or their wife does too. Just saying. All right, we're going to read some of your comments after the break. Hit me up using the hashtag #HeyDan. And man, you guys are quick. I was wondering how to say folk smoke in sign language earlier, and one of you was kind enough to let me know. That's next. when we finish the story. You guys are amazing. You know that a little earlier in the show, I pontificated on how the heck do you sign the word folk smoke that the governor used a little earlier today. And Aaron on Twitter apparently has the answer. They say the first part means now. The second frame means so much time has passed or we've come so far since then. And finally, the third part, wow. Thanks so much for this crash course in ASL. I appreciate that. You were amazing. All the knowledge out there, everybody that writes in and dishes out, that's fantastic. Hit me up on Hey Dan if you have something to share. You can also email the story at kgw.com. Now, I have to ask you guys something. What do you think of this? What do you think of this situation I got going on up here? It's been, I said it was 40 days. It was even longer than that. What are you guys doing at home? Do you have spouses cutting your hair? I was asking people on Twitter, should Kristen cut this mess up here, or should I try? Maybe my 3-year-old boys. Or maybe I should just go all the way, let it go down to the floor. I don't know what to do. See me Monday, and I guess you'll know. That's the story. The news at 6:30 is next. Have a good weekend.